The storm clouds were rolling in when everything changed. The thunder cracked like the sky itself was warning the world that something terrible was about to happen. On a lonely road at the edge of town, where streetlights flickered weakly and silence felt heavy enough to choke, a small hand pressed desperately against the window of a rusted white van. Her eyes were red from crying, her cheeks streaked with dirt and fear. She held up a crumpled piece of paper with trembling fingers. On it, in messy, hurried handwriting, were two words that cut through the darkness like a blade: kidnapped. Help. Before we continue, if you believe in kindness, bravery, and giving people a second chance no matter how rough they look on the outside, make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Everyday Heroes. Stories like these deserve to be heard. The girl's name was Lila. 7 years old. Small, hopeful, and fragile in a world too harsh for someone her age. She had been taken hours earlier, pulled into the van by a man she thought was asking for directions. No one saw. No one noticed. The road was empty. The world kept turning while she screamed into the dark. Now, with the van parked in the woods as her captor stepped away to make a phone call, she pressed herself to the window, praying for a miracle she wasn't sure existed anymore. And then, she heard it, not the sound of rescue she expected, but the deep rumble of motorcycle engines. 4 of them. Loud. Rough. Sharp. They tore through the quiet like trouble had just arrived. She saw the leather jackets, the heavy boots, the hardened faces of men who looked like they'd lived 1,000 dangerous lives. If she had seen them anywhere else, she would have been terrified. But in that moment, her heart whispered something different. These weren't ordinary men. These were the only people around, and her only chance. The bikers were on their way back from a long ride. They weren't the type people smiled at in grocery stores or invited to backyard dinners. Life had carved deep lines in their faces, the kind that came from pain, mistakes, and years searching for redemption on the open road. Their leader, a broad-shouldered man with silver hair and eyes sharp as broken glass, was the first to notice the tiny face pressed against the window of the van. He slammed his brakes so hard dust flew up around them. The others stopped instantly, reading the shock in his expression. For a heartbeat, everything froze. The wind. The trees. Even the sky seemed to hold its breath. Then they saw her, the girl's tear-streaked cheeks, shaking hands, the plea for help crushed between her fingers. And their hearts, hardened by years of surviving, cracked open like fragile eggs. Without hesitation, the bikers moved. Their boots pounded the ground. Their vests rustled. Every instinct in them screamed that this wasn't just a situation. This was a child. A scared child. And nothing mattered more. Lila stared at them as they approached, unsure whether to shrink back or call out. But there was something in their eyes, shock, anger, and something she desperately needed, compassion. When the closest biker reached the window, she flinched, expecting the worst. Instead, he placed a steady hand on the metal door and gently said nothing, just softened his gaze, inviting her to breathe again. They saw the rope on the floor. The duct tape. And in that moment, every one of them understood the horrible truth. The leader signaled silently, training from long-forgotten days kicking in. 2 scanned the woods. 1 checked inside the van. 1 stayed with Lila, speaking softly, reassuring her with the calm strength of someone who had once needed saving and never forgot what it felt like. Suddenly, a man shouted in the distance. The kidnapper had returned. His voice was angry, impatient, he didn't yet know what waited for him. The tall biker with the tattooed arms stepped forward, blocking the path between the woods and the van. The kidnapper's expression twisted from confusion to panic the moment he saw the bikers. He tried to run. He didn't make it far. The bikers didn't lay a single unnecessary hand on him, they simply surrounded him, powerful and immovable, until he dropped to his knees, cursing and shaking, caught not by violence, but by justice. Lila watched through the window, clutching the paper she no longer needed. The storm that had been growing in her chest began to ease, replaced by a trembling hope she had nearly lost. The leader opened the van door carefully, like he was afraid even the wind might hurt her. She stared at him, unsure if she should trust this stranger with steel rings on his hands and a face weathered by time. But when he knelt and extended his arms, the world finally felt safe again. She sobbed into his chest, tiny fingers gripping the leather of his vest as if it were the only solid thing left in her spinning universe. They called the police, staying with her until officers arrived. But they didn't just hand her over and walk away. They stood by her side, guarding her like an unbreakable wall. They gave statements, answered questions, and refused to leave until the officers assured them she would soon be reunited with her family. Hours later, when Lila's mother ran to her, screaming her name, the bikers stepped back quietly. They didn't want thanks. They didn't need applause. They just wanted to make sure she was home again, in the arms where she belonged. But as the mother hugged her child, she turned to the bikers, tears streaming down her face, and whispered 1,000 unspoken words through her gratitude. The leader nodded once, a gesture of respect, before he and his brothers returned to their bikes. They rode off into the fading light, engines rumbling like distant thunder, leaving behind a story that would forever remind people that heroes don't always come in uniforms, sometimes they come covered in tattoos, leather, and the scars of their own battles. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, and subscribe to Everyday Heroes. These real and powerful stories deserve to be heard. Before we end, tell us in the comments, would you have stopped to help? Because sometimes, it only takes one brave moment to change a life forever.